Hi, welcome to Fast Intelligent Care, the podcast by Enable Lifecare, where we dive into smarter care solutions, cutting-edge products, and practical insights for healthcare professionals across Australia and New Zealand. We're on to episode 3 with Kate Silvy from Saltwater OT. We're going to talk today about manual handling, transfer aids, hoists, and slings. So first thing I want to ask you, Kate, is if there's been any transfer aid or hoist success stories that you've come across in your stint with community.
Yeah, look, I always find these ones are tricky because nobody likes the concept of moving to a hoist. It's quite a big mental barrier I think people put up. And for that reason, I love the standing aids. The shifties and the opposite ups in those sorts of aids where you can sort of sell them to them. Look, I've got this really, I can see that what your issue is, you can still stand up, but you're really struggling with that turning and moving to sit down. And I've got this aid, I just want to show it to you, and just where you can still stand up, you're still using your legs and you're using your arms. It's great. It's really easy for your supports to just pop the seat back behind you, but it just takes that difficulty out of stepping. And I just take it out, like often take them out as a trial to hire sort of approach. Yeah. And most of them have gone, oh, this is fantastic. So much easier. And often for carers as well that think hoists are going to be this big, cumbersome, timely thing that they've got to put on people, the slings, in order to get them to stand up. And when they see that aid, it just breaks down a lot of those barriers. So I think it's just a really good AT device to keep people participating in their transfers for as long as possible before putting them in more of a what's the word?
Like a passive hoist?
Yeah, passive roll. Six, that's what I was up. Yeah. So I love that. That's one of my favourite manual handling tools.
Yeah, I also find that a lot of clients prefer transfer aids where they can still participate, or like you said, it's more an active process than being passive, because I think it's for most people it's important to be able to do as much as they can because they want to have that independence, even if it is independence with an assistive device. So I also find even the standing hoists are a lot easier than a passive hoist. So even though it's still a machine kind of lifting you up to some extent, you are still weight bearing, you're still holding on to something. It doesn't feel like you're just lying there and you're just being lifted up, and you have no say or no way of controlling that. But I find the good thing about the Oxford Up is the fact that it has that recess, or not recess, but retaining wall. I've had a client that he was very resistant to a hoist. He didn't want to. He needed a lot of support in terms of cognition as well, but he did have the ability to weight bear. But he would always step past the footplate, and we're like, oh, is this not going to work? Is this are you going to have to go over to the hoist? So it's good to have something that could just prevent that, because it's such a small little feature of it, but that we could, there you're going passive hoist.
Yeah, and just display on the Oxford Up too for your power wheelchair users as well. It just gives you that little bit more width to get the device into the powered chair, so it makes a big difference too.
Yeah, and with community, you'd have a lot of clients that would have very limited space for hoist and transfer aids. Do you find there is a workaround for that? Is it sometimes looking at the transfer aid, or is it looking at restructuring the environment? Is there something a tip that you would give when considering something like that, where it's just a space thing?
Yeah, good garage. No. Throwing things in the shower recess. Look, I suppose it comes down to a few things. That's a really tricky question. But if it's long term, if you're looking at a young person that's going to be using a hoist forever, things like a ceiling hoist can be a real game changer. Something that's a bit permanent because it just doesn't take up the space. And yeah, so it just cleans up the environment. I think one of the biggest concerns I find, people don't want that because they think it's a permanent structure that's going to have to live there forever. And when they go to sell their house, no one wants a ceiling hoist, but it's quite a different story. They can be taken away as easily as they're put in place and patched up quite. You wouldn't know that they were there. But yeah, it is just looking at ways of, I think it's a really important point that you raise. It's a valid thing to consider when you're prescribing, is where is this going to live once it's used? You don't want to create more hazards than it's worth. And it's just about thinking creatively with the family or the household as to where that device can be stored. If it can't be a ceiling hoist, or it is just a floor hoist or a standing aid or a commode chair or whatever it ends up being, it's okay. This is part of the assessment process. We found this device that you need, but where is it going to live? If it needs a PowerPoint, is there a power supply to that thing can get charged? So it's just something that you incorporate in your assessment process. Yeah, and considering that when you're making your recommendation.
Yeah. I recently went out with an OT that we were doing a trial with a passive hoist, and we were having to transfer from the person's bed into a princess chair. So a few things that take up quite a bit of space. And the idea was that we wanted to trial it because the support workers were wanting to have a ceiling hoist, or at least like maybe have a gantry.
Yeah.
And I remember we had to have this conversation with the staff that, we'd love to have a ceiling hoist in, but we have to actually show to the NDIS that space-wise the passive hoist is not going to work, because NDIS is going to look at what's lower cost.
Yeah.
Like ask, well, the passive hoist is cheaper. Why don't you just use that? So we did this trial, and it took us such a long time to transfer the client from the bed into the chair, because we had to maneuver so many times to just maneuver that space. And obviously that is something that can come into play with motivating for that type of like a ceiling hoist or a gantry, is that even though you're paying for a higher cost item, it's saving time from the support workers, it's protecting them from injuries, it's making the whole process less stressful for the client.
Yeah, the old failed trial.
The old failed trial, yes, yeah. Trial it before it doesn't work.
And I often agree. Like, I often take that approach as well. Is that okay? We have to trial. And this is probably one of the hardest things that we're working as therapists in the community, because we come with a wealth of knowledge in terms of, years of experience working with these specific pieces of equipment. Yeah. And you do your trials, and you're considering things without even being aware that you're considering things in your clinical decision making. So you often rule out a whole level of lower cost things without actually making that a conscious thing. You're just like, I know this person's got this, and so therefore I'm going to go and look at and trial these items. And when you submit your report, it then comes back, but you haven't considered X, Y, Z. And you're like, oh, well, I did actually consider X, Y, Z, but a clinical person would actually understand already why that doesn't work. So
yeah,
I'm getting better at including all those things as a consideration in your report. Because you've got to be aware of who's reading it at the other end, and as frustrating as it is that you've got to go through that process. But yeah, it's frustrating that sometimes you have to do a trial to fail it, so then you can write about it. So you did that when you knew, without
that everyone's gonna work. Yeah,
4 hours of your time going through the process. It's just fine. Yeah, getting that balance right to show that you're considering those things and why. The other big one I find is downsizing the bed. I actually thought of that too when you were talking about the hoist.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people have a queen bed or a double bed, and they're looking at transitioning to a hoist. Selling them a single or king single is often a way creating a bit more space in a bedroom. So, yeah, looking at what other items you can take out of the room as well or reduce space. It's a tricky one that some people are quite on board with the idea, and other people, you got no chance of getting that double bed off them. So, yeah, that's
a good point. And I guess if it's someone who is needing something like sling application, it's a lot easier for the caregivers as well. If it's not a double bed that they're having to assist them with. But it's a good point. It's not just looking at the assistive tech, but what other things are in the room as well.
Yeah, and flooring can be a huge one as well with your hoist.
Yeah.
Yeah, so hard flooring, making sure your flooring's appropriate. It can make a big difference in terms of just maneuverability of a hoist as well. Which, if you can move it a lot easier, then you don't need as much space or force, and it's not as awkward. But yeah, considering the flooring as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you, Kate. We'll go on to our last episode 4, which will go into mattresses, beds, and everything pressure care. That's it for this episode of Fast Intelligent Care. If you're tired of spending hours on clinical reports, you're not alone, and we hear it all the time. And that's why we created the Enable Lifecare app that make your AT assessments, product selection, and report writing so much quicker, easier, and more accurate. Don't forget to sign up to our newsletter for updates for our upcoming free CPD events, such as our webinars, product updates, resources, and more ways to enable smarter care. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time on Fast Intelligent Care.